if you were to compare Indy Sports Ticket and the Indianapolis Colts, like in terms of just the product, Indy Sports Ticket heads and shoulders above it. And the Colts will hopefully trend in an upward direction. I would say that, going back 2 years ago to last year, that they progressed forward. They're Gardner Minshew making a good throw away from probably making the playoffs. I think the expectation this year is Anthony Richardson should be better than Gardner Minshew. So the Colts should make the playoffs this season. And that is not, a far-fetched possibility. This is not an incredibly tough schedule once again for the Colts. And so the expectation of them to make the playoffs is fair. And there's an expectation for Anthony Richardson to make a leap, not from me, not from Dan, but from, some national media people. And something that I've noticed is that whenever people discuss Anthony Richardson and how he's going to ascend into greatness this season, they always bring up Adonai Mitchell, AD Mitchell, the second-round pick out of Texas that the Colts took this season. So, what are people expecting from AD Mitchell? Okay, these past few seasons, we've seen an influx of wide receivers making immediate impacts in the NFL, but that's not normal. What Zay Flowers did for the Ravens last year isn't normal. What Puka Nacua did for the Rams last year isn't normal. Okay, going back to 2020, that's the year that we started seeing these rookies come in and play wide receiver and have impacts immediately. That was the Justin Jefferson year where he was, pretty great, right? And then in 2021, following the Justin Jefferson season, Jamar Chase had an outstanding rookie campaign. And then 2022 for the Jets, it was Garrett Wilson. Then last year, Puka Nacua and Zay Flowers really stood out. And when you look at the best rookie receiving seasons ever, you see all the players that I just mentioned, and then a bunch of players not from recent history. Like the next closest guys, or at least the guys most recently, besides the guys that I just named, are guys like Odell Beckham Jr. in 2014, Amari Cooper in 2015, Michael Thomas in 2016. All three of those players came into the league around a decade ago, right? So they come in the league about a decade ago, and then we go, several years without seeing legitimate, impactful rookie receivers. That is the norm, right? But because over these past 3 seasons, we've had some rookie receivers that stand out, people are now more expectant of rookie receivers to come in and show up and make an immediate impact. And that's just not realistic. The history of the NFL shows us that rookie receivers aren't usually super impactful. And when we remember that, and we also keep in mind that, AD Mitchell was the 11th receiver off the board, then how in the world can these national media people and local media people expect for AD Mitchell, a guy who we haven't even seen catch a ball yet in the NFL, how can they expect for him to be part of why Anthony Richardson is going to be better? That just seems like an unfair standard to hold AD Mitchell to. If this was Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors or Romo Dunze, then I'd be much more willing to get behind that idea of a rookie receiver coming in and providing an immediate impact to help elevate a young quarterback in Anthony Richardson. AD Mitchell, though, isn't one of those guys. He was never in conversation to be one of those guys. Okay, there's a reason why he was the 11th receiver taken off the board. Okay, if he was a guy who was potentially going to come in and make an immediate impact, then guess what? He wouldn't have lasted till the second round. He wouldn't have. And so I think that expectations for AD Mitchell are too high. If you think he's going to be part of the reason why Anthony Richardson becomes a much better quarterback, I think that's no. It's not going to be it. Most rookie receivers come into the NFL and they struggle. I think AD Mitchell is going to end up being a good receiver for the Colts, but I don't think he's going to come in and have some record-breaking, elite top-tier rookie season. I think he's going to struggle for the first quarter of the year. Okay, and then after week 4 or 5, we'll start to see him progress. Okay, and part of that is because the Colts play good defenses to open the season. They play the Texans in week 1, led by DeMeco Ryans. They've got a couple good corners. Then they play the Packers, who are going to be good defensively again. And then they play the Bears, who are sneaky good defensively. Figured it out later in the year when they added a pass rusher at the trade deadline. The Steelers are the Steelers. It's Mike Tomlin. They're going to play good defense. All 4 of those teams are going to, at a minimum, be good defensively. I don't expect him to come in week 1 and drastically change this Colts offense. I expect for AD Mitchell to start out slow. And then if he's the prospect that everybody tells me that he is, then he'll figure it out as the year progresses. Okay. And I was trying to figure out like what terms to kind of put this in, and fantasy football came to mind. I used to play fantasy football. I used to be in like two or three leagues a year. And then I was like, no, can't do this anymore. Fantasy football's dumb for several different reasons. If I have time at the end of this, then I'll highlight them for you. Um, so like if I was playing fantasy football this year, I wouldn't draft AD Mitchell. I'd let someone else draft him. And then, after 4 or 5 games, when AD Mitchell struggles and isn't great, he'll get waived. And then after he gets waived, you go to the waiver wire, and you pick him up. That is what I would do. Like, because I don't think that things click for him until later in the year. Because anytime you do something new, or anytime you do something at a higher level, there's an adjustment period. And when you're playing in the NFL, you're playing wide receiver, like the routes are different, the schemes are different, the defenses play you differently. Like college teams don't play a lot of man-to-man unless you're, Alabama or Georgia, because most teams just don't have the talent to line up across these electric wide receivers and play man-to-man. But in the NFL, like these are the best defensive backs in the world. They have the talent to actually play man-to-man defense. And so like you have to adjust to that. And, the route concepts are different, and there's a new quarterback, and there's just a lot of newness for receivers when they enter the NFL. And then you pair that with the fact that, Anthony Richardson's barely played. He threw 84 balls last year. Like that's not exactly going to help out Adonai Mitchell either. And that's the other thing. Like when we look at receivers that have had outlier rookie seasons, like they've played for quarterbacks that have at least been around for a while, right? Like Puka Nacua last year played with Matthew Stafford. Zay Flowers last year played with Lamar Jackson. So it's very beneficial for these rookie receivers that come in to go out and struggle unless they're playing with a quarterback that's been around and is known as one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. So, yeah, expectations for AD Mitchell need to be lowered. Really quickly before I go and I pass the mic to the great Dan Dockich, who will be on the air from noon to 3. Make sure you download that Indie Sports Ticket app so you can stream his show as well. Fantasy football is dumb, and it drives me crazy because for 2 reasons. Reason number 1 is I don't like watching my favorite team play and not feeling like I can root for them because I have a fantasy player on the other team. I don't like sitting down watching games and being like, oh, if the Raiders score here, I hope they throw it to Brock Bowers. And then getting upset that they didn't throw it to Brock Bowers. It ruins the experience for me a little bit. Here's the other thing, and the thing that really drives me crazy about fantasy football. People often equate fantasy football success to how good a player is. And it drives me nuts. I can't stand it. It drives me crazy because fantasy football is not real football. It's in the name. It's fantasy football. And when you play fantasy football, it's, like running backs are really important and quarterbacks aren't as important and all those different types of things. And like if you have Kirk Cousins as your fantasy quarterback and that's the only way that you track his season, you would think that Kirk Cousins is really good because he puts up numbers in garbage time, which helps your fantasy team. Even though if you watch Kirk Cousins, you would know that he's, an above average quarterback at best. I think that's the best example for it. So people will take fantasy football stats and like try and use them in like real world football arguments that are just wrong. And it drives me crazy. I can't stand it. I've had too many conversations with too many people where they're like, oh, but he's great in fantasy. I'm like, I don't care about fantasy. We're talking about the real world here. So it bothers me. I don't like it for those 2 reasons. Maybe that's ridiculous, but whatever. Fantasy football I get it. People like it. Sportsbooks make a lot of money on it. Yeah. So fantasy football, just not my thing. It used to be, like when I was in high school and stuff, I'd do it, but nah, I don't do that anymore. I like to live in the real world where real people where real people live and where quarterback play really matters. That's the football world that I like to be in. I don't like to be in fantasy land where I am dependent upon, Austin Eckler. I'd rather be dependent upon Mahomes or somebody like that. So, yeah, that's why I don't like fantasy football. So